Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video, we will cover how trainees can best grow muscle with minimal equipment and how this may be programmed. Before we delve into how to train with minimal equipment, we first need to cover some fundamental concepts for hypertrophy training that can allow us to make the best decisions possible when training with minimal equipment. These principles are the foundations of hypertrophy training and can be implemented in many different ways. Once we understand these concepts, we can then try our best to apply these to minimalistic training. The first variable we will cover is proximity to failure. This simply refers to how close a set is taken to failure with strict technique. Proximity to failure is usually quantified using the RPE or RIR scales, which use a numerical scale to determine how many reps the trainee could have performed before failure. For hypertrophy training, we generally want to take each set fairly close to failure to maximize muscle growth. As a general rule, we want to take heavier compound lifts in the 6 to 12 rep range around 1 to 3 reps before failure, and lighter isolation lifts in the 12 to 20 rep range around 0 to 2 reps before failure. Heavier loads don't need to be taken as close to failure to stimulate all muscle fibers, as they will already be recruited and trained from the beginning of the set. Lighter loads, on the other hand, generally need to be taken closer to failure to maximize hypertrophy, as these loads won't recruit all muscle fibers from the start of the set. So once the low threshold motor units fatigue, the high threshold motor units kick in towards the end of the set, and only then are they actually trained. For a more detailed explanation of this concept, you can find the video on this channel titled, "How Close to Failure Should You Train for Hypertrophy?" Next, let's discuss rep ranges and loads for hypertrophy training. To maximize hypertrophy, we generally want to train in the 6 to 20 rep range. Rep ranges can probably be taken higher than this, up to around 30 to 40 reps, provided that each set is taken fairly close to failure. However, these very high rep ranges are practically less efficient than lower rep ranges, as they take longer to perform and may induce more cardiovascular fatigue. Next, let's discuss volume. For hypertrophy training, volume refers to how many sets are performed per muscle group per week. When calculating volume, we first need to ensure the training is performing each set with strict technique, a close proximity to failure, and with the appropriate rep range and load. Volume seems to follow an inverted U-shaped relationship with hypertrophy. This means that more volume generally results in greater muscle growth up to a point, and then more volume than this may result in less hypertrophy. Here are some general volume ranges that should be effective for hypertrophy for the average intermediate trainee. This doesn't mean that everyone will see the best hypertrophy results from these volume ranges. This is just a rough guideline. Each trainee should experiment over time to find what volumes result in the best muscle growth for each muscle group for each individual. Now that we have covered the fundamentals of hypertrophy training, we can explore how to implement effective training with minimal equipment. While the principles of hypertrophy don't change, we can manipulate our training to best align with these principles using the equipment we have available. Let's now cover some strategies that can allow trainees to get the best hypertrophy stimulus with limited equipment. In terms of exercise selection, trainees can train most of the body effectively using body weight exercises. These exercises involve no or very little equipment and can be scaled to suit the individual's strength levels. Exercises like pull-ups, horizontal rows, push-ups, dips, lunges, split squats, sliding hamstring curls, and their variations can be a solid foundation of training requiring very little equipment. These can be made more difficult by adding load if the trainee has access to it. These exercises, in combination with some accessory lifts using light loads, can probably make for a solid hypertrophy training program. A strategy that can be implemented to make training more difficult without any additional load is using blood flow restriction. This is where the trainee cuffs their legs or arms, which reduces the amount of blood that can be supplied to and removed from the muscles. This means that less oxygen is able to be provided to the muscles, and metabolic byproducts won't be able to leave the muscles as quickly. This increases metabolite accumulation and ultimately means that the muscle fibers will undergo the same amount of stress to lift lighter loads. This means that trainees can get a similar hypertrophic stimulus lifting lighter loads. Due to the limited amount of weight that can be used, trainees may need to perform higher rep ranges. We know that higher rep ranges are able to achieve similar hypertrophy adaptations to lower rep ranges, provided that they are taken close to failure. So for exercises where trainees can't lift in the traditional 8 to 12 rep range, they can lift in the 15 to 30 rep range and take each set around 0 to 2 reps before failure. This will ensure that all muscle fibers are recruited and trained. The last factor that should be considered when training with limited equipment is our nutritional approach. All nutritional interventions should remain the same as would be seen with the regular hypertrophy training. However, trainees may want to avoid being in a caloric deficit during such times. This is because despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide an ideal hypertrophy stimulus from training. This means that if the trainee is in a calorie deficit, they are at a greater risk of losing muscle. This muscle will certainly come back with high quality hypertrophy training, but cutting weight may be better suited to a different time when we can provide the best hypertrophy stimulus. Therefore, if training is not ideal, trainees should eat at maintenance or surplus calories. Let's now explore how we can create a hypertrophy training program using minimal equipment. For this example, let's say the trainee has the following equipment available: bars for dips and pull-ups, suspension handles, adjustable dumbbells up to 15 kilos each, and a flat bench or piece of furniture that replicates a bench. With this equipment in mind, let's now choose exercises for each muscle group. For the chest, we can use dips with weight or just body weight depending on the individual's strength levels. And the other exercise we can perform is dumbbell flies. For the back, we can perform weighted or unweighted pull-ups and weighted or unweighted horizontal rows on the suspension handles. For the quads, we can perform weighted Bulgarian split squats and blood flow restricted walking lunges. For the hamstrings, we can perform single leg or double leg sliding hamstring curls depending on the trainee's strength levels, using a towel or some other material that will slide. For the triceps and biceps, we can perform kickbacks and curls with dumbbells. These can also be performed with blood flow restriction if the dumbbells are too light to lift in the appropriate rep range. And for the calves, we can simply perform single leg calf raises with an additional load in the form of dumbbells if required. The delts will get some stimulus from the chest and back exercises, but in this case we may want to perform extra delt work to ensure they are hit properly. So we can perform lateral raises and reverse flies to get some extra volume for the side and rear delts. Next, let's select weekly volumes for each muscle group. Since training may not be ideal at this point in time, volumes for each muscle group may need to be slightly higher than usual to maximize muscle growth. This is because we may not have the luxury of implementing the exercises which best stimulate particular muscle groups based on your individual experience. Therefore, additional volume can make up for this lack of quality. However, we still need to ensure that we don't breach our systemic recovery capacity. We will implement the following volumes for each muscle group: 18 sets for the chest, 18 sets for the back, 10 direct sets for the biceps, 10 direct sets for the triceps, 6 direct sets for the side delts and 6 for the rear delts, 16 sets for the quads, 10 sets for the hamstrings, and 10 sets for the calves. Based on these exercises and volumes, we can now create a mesocycle of training. For this example, we have chosen a 6-day per week frequency using a push-pull leg split, so each muscle group is trained twice per week. As we can see here, we have used a 4-week mesocycle consisting of 1 deload week and 3 overloading weeks. The deload in week 1 uses a lower volume than the rest to reduce accumulated fatigue from the previous mesocycle. The following 3 weeks use the volumes that we established previously. The chest, triceps and shoulder exercises are performed on day 1 and 4, the back and biceps are trained on days 2 and 5, and the legs are trained on days 3 and 6. Because exercise selection is limited, we've implemented a higher number of sets for each exercise to accumulate the necessary volume. This may be necessary when we don't have the luxury of selecting a range of different exercises targeting a single muscle group. And as we can see here, we've implemented appropriate loads to be used and the appropriate proximity to failure. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.